There is a particular silence that falls over a school during a lockdown. It's not the quiet of an empty building. It's a heavy, breathless silence, thick with the unspoken fears of hundreds of students trying to become invisible. The familiar becomes alien, the safe, suddenly sinister. These are the stories from within that silence. 3 true accounts of lockdowns that crossed the line from drill into nightmare. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon at Jefferson High in Colorado. The final period had just begun, the lethargic hum of a school day winding down, then a crackle. A voice, strained and too calm, came over the intercom. "This is not a drill. Lock down immediately. I repeat, this is not a drill." The familiar routine was shattered. The frantic scramble to cover door windows with construction paper wasn't playful anymore. It was desperate. Teachers' hands fumbled with light switches, plunging classrooms into a murky twilight. The hallways, once roaring with life, fell into a tomb-like stillness.
"There's a man in the parking lot. He's just walking."
And then, the knocking began. Not a pounding, not a demand for entry. It was a soft, testing tap, like someone gently running a finger along the edge of a tombstone. In one classroom, it stopped right at their door. The teacher, Mrs. Gable, stood frozen, her hand hovering over the deadbolt, her breath caught in her throat. Was it a police officer doing a sweep? Or was it him, methodically checking which door might be unlocked? The only answer was the receding sound of footsteps, moving on. When the SWAT team finally breached the building, their armored figures a surreal sight in the history hallway, they found nothing but the lingering scent of fear. The man had vanished into the encroaching dusk, but he left a calling card, a single black duffel bag, discarded near the bike racks. Inside, officers found a realistic black pellet gun, a full roll of duct tape, and a bundle of unused zip ties. The man was never identified and was never found. He was a ghost who came for a visit, leaving behind a community forever haunted by a single unanswerable question. What was his plan? We are taught from a young age to trust the adult at the front of the room. But what happens when that trust becomes your prison? In the fall of 2017, a middle school in the heart of the Midwest learned the hard way that lockdowns don't always start from the outside. Sometimes the danger is already standing at the whiteboard. The students knew something was off from the first period. Mr. Evans, the substitute, was jittery. A nervous sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. His eyes darted around the room, never settling, as if tracking flies only he could see. He'd start a sentence about geography only to trail off, muttering to himself. The class giggled at first, thinking him an eccentric, but the laughter died when the principal's voice announced a code yellow lockdown for an internal disturbance. The color drained from Mr. Evans' face. "They're coming," he whispered, his voice cracking. "They're coming for us." Before anyone could react, he strode to the door and turned the lock with a definitive click. Panic, now cold and sharp, set in. "Sir, we have to follow the drill," a brave student said. Mr. Evans whirled around, his eyes wide and unfocused. "No, they'll hear us, we have to be quiet." He began pacing, a caged animal, his monologue a terrifying spiral. He spoke of voices in the ventilation system, of figures watching him from the football field through the window. The students were no longer his charges, they were his fellow hostages in a delusion. One girl, hidden behind a backpack, managed to text her mother, "We're locked in. Our teacher has gone crazy. He's talking about the voices in the walls. I'm scared." The standoff lasted for what felt like an eternity. When the door finally splintered open under the force of a police ram, the scene was frozen in a terrifying tableau. Mr. Evans was standing in the center of the room, not with a gun, but clutching a broken chair leg like a club, his face a mask of confused terror. The children were physically unharmed, but the psychological scars ran deep. The subsequent investigation revealed a history of severe, untreated paranoid schizophrenia. He had slipped through the cracks of the hiring process, a lit match in a room full of kindling. And sometimes the most terrifying threat of all is the one that has no explanation. In 2021, a high school in Texas was scheduled for a routine, unannounced lockdown drill. The faculty was prepared, the police were notified, but a catastrophic miscommunication meant one crucial group was left in the dark, the students. When the principal's voice, firm and urgent, declared, "Lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight, this is not a drill," the students believed him. Why wouldn't they? This was the real thing. The fear was immediate and absolute. They huddled in closets, squeezed under lab tables, their hearts hammering against the cold linoleum floor. And then, they heard it. The sound that would haunt them for years. Footsteps. Not the hurried, purposeful steps of police, but a slow, deliberate, almost casual walk. The cadence was wrong. It was a stroll. One class, hiding in darkness, watched in paralyzed horror as a shadow paused outside the thin slit under their door. It didn't move on. It just stood there, blocking the red light for what felt like an hour. They could hear breathing, a low, wet sound. Then the footsteps moved on. Another student, peering through a vent, swore they saw the bottom of dark jeans and a pair of scuffed black boots walk past. The school was supposed to be sealed. The police were outside, so who or what was walking the halls?
"The drill is now over. I repeat, the drill is over. Please return to your normal schedules."
The relief was a tidal wave, but it receded just as quickly, leaving behind the cold stones of doubt. When asked, the police liaison was baffled. Their officers had established a perimeter. None had been instructed to enter the building. The footsteps, the shadow, the jingling, they had no source, no explanation. The official report called it an auditory hallucination born of collective stress. But try telling that to the students who heard the footsteps stop right outside their door and who still wonder what would have happened if the lock had simply failed. These stories remind us that the trauma of a lockdown isn't always about the violence that does happen. It's about the violence of the imagination, the terror of the unknown that flourishes in that breathless silence. It's the shadow under the door, the knock that doesn't come again, and the chilling realization that safety is a fragile illusion. The scariest stories aren't always in the news, they're in the hushed recollections of those who lived them, in the places we once called safe.